from the Big Night Media Studios at the Boston TD Garden, this is the Word on the Street podcast, hosted by Mick Morrissey and Mark Goodale.
Good to see you, Mick.
Likewise, Mark. Always good to see you.
Golf season, or for you, landscaping season, depending on the course you are on. I understand that your game is just, you're on fire right now after a tough start. Is that right?
It was a very tough start, I have to say. But I've used AI to improve my game. As
That's good to know.
My scoring in AI, my swing in AI. Yeah, AI is ruling my life right now, Mark.
Yeah, I understand. Now, Katharine, you play golf, don't you?
Not very well at all.
Yeah, but you play.
No, actually, I just kind of swing, and sometimes I hit a ball, and it goes a few feet.
And the cart ride is
swing
nice,
and a miss. Yes, I'm a great cart driver.
Yeah, raking sand traps.
Oh, by the way, I'm in the market for a new cart. Yeah, four-seater. Yeah.
Really?
A four-seater?
Yeah. Four-seater. Why do you need a
lithium battery? It's going to be fantastic.
You don't want to get the ones with the back, too?
So because you can't put your clubs on them.
Is that operated by AI as well? Is AI
that
telling
would be
you to
controlled
buy
by AI, yes.
I understand. Well, have you played in Scotland?
I've never played
in Scotland.
No.
That's bucket list. Those are the greatest courses in the world.
Well, there's a reason I ask, because our terrific guest today, Steve McKay, hails from Scotland. He is the CEO of DLR Group, the employee-owned integrated design firm ranked number 61 on the ENR Top 500 list. Steve grew up in Scotland, played rugby at a high level, trained as an architect, you don't see that every day, and spent decades rising through DLR before becoming CEO. Steve, welcome to the street. It's really great to have you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And so can you talk to us about your rugby career? Because it did have a period at the end of it, as I understand, but you played for quite some time.
Yeah, I did. I played in high school where it started. I went to a high school that only had a rugby team, no soccer team, no football team. So I played rugby. I was fortunate enough to play with a great bunch of folks and played all through high school, played at a little club level, and then did some Scottish school stuff, which was a lot of fun, and then unfortunately got injured and ended my career probably sooner than I wanted it to at the time, but probably a good thing.
Injuries happen in rugby, I understand.
Just little ones, just little ones, but yeah.
Fingers hanging off, toes hanging off.
It was never that bad. We saw some pretty gruesome stuff, and
I can imagine.
The weather's not great, so it's kind of like a natural painkiller. When it's when it's minus 12 outside and you're playing rugby in shorts on the west coast of Scotland, it's you can't feel anything anyway. So
I remember coming home after games, because I played rugby too, Steve. I remember coming home covered in mud. Like just covered head to toe in mud. And it wasn't like there was a lot of water pressure for a shower. So it was always a bath that I would take. And that bath, after I'd come out of it, was just ringed with dirt.
Turf. Yeah. It's a grass. It's a turf still on you. You found things in places you didn't know you owned it. But you were young. It was fun. I enjoyed it. It was a great sport. Taught me a lot. So
I was going to ask you, Steve, what parts of that journey still shape how you lead today? Did you take anything from rugby with you into the work world?
Bear in mind, I've lived in the States 25. I lived in the States 32 years, being a citizen 25 years, and so I had to learn all the sports in the US. But in rugby, I really loved that you did offense and defense. You were just a team. It wasn't a different set of people who had the ball. So you had to be in defence when you were being attacked, and you had to be in attack when you had the ball. And the thing I really loved the most about it that I remember today is you learn how to win gracefully and you learn how to lose gracefully.
Yeah.
And in our business and architecture, where you're particularly when your win rate, you're lucky if it's 1 in 3, 1 in 4. Yeah. You need to learn how to lose gracefully. Yeah, and in rugby, that's kind of what it taught me. It didn't matter how hard the game was, didn't matter how many sneaky punches there were on the field. At the end of the game, it's handshakes, it's showered, it's beers, it's thank yous. And then a lot of times you'd walk back to the club with the people that you had been on the field with. And so that's probably the biggest thing that it kind of taught me, is to win and lose gracefully.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier too about you have to play offense, you have to play defense, and everything that comes with both of those. Wearing a lot of hats, I guess, is the term that's used in our industry.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing, I guess. But also toughness, trust, I would imagine, is part of that game too.
Yeah, you learn how to be a team and be a little flexible. I mean, I ended my rugby career as a winger, started my rugby career as an inside centre, so I kind of progressively moved further along the offensive line until I was out in the wing. And that was another great lesson. You know, when you're winning, the winger gets all the glory. You know? The ball's out to the winger. See, when you're losing, winger gets the ball, and then the winger gets pummeled. So, you know, because nobody else wants it because you're getting beaten. So, yeah, it was. I enjoyed it. Listen, I really enjoyed it. Yeah. And if anything else, I've always been a team person. Even in my job, you know, I say this a lot to the company, the staff. I've never done a project alone.
Yeah.
There's no such a thing in our industry as a project alone. And so I've always liked to, I worked all through college, all through university with really the same 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
We did all the projects together, mostly. And so, yeah, I've always been kind of a team person. I like people. That's probably I like people.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
and
I like people.
Steve, after college, you know, you kind of looked to the great wide world. You ended up in Jamaica for a couple of years. Yeah. And then I love the story that you got in a car for 7 months and drove around our lovely country, the United States, before ending up in Seattle. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience made you realize this was the place for you? And
well, I don't know if I knew that at the beginning, to be honest. When I was young, I was in the fortunate position that my father's eldest brother was a chemical engineer, and he finished the latter 30 years of his life running the Bahamas Oil Refinery Company in Freeport, Lucaya, Grand Bahama Island. He was 6'8", thin as a rake, white freckle-faced, ginger-haired Scotsman, and he married Miss Bahamas 1969. So
living the dream.
Everyone in the island knew him, and when we were old enough to be able to be put on a plane on our own, we were allowed to go spend our summers in the Bahamas.
Oh, wow.
And so the first time I came back from a trip like that, my father said to my mother, he will never stay here. Yeah. He's seen that there's a bigger world. Yeah. So when I graduated, there was a huge recession between my first graduation and second graduation. There was a big recession, and a lot of my friends went to Hong Kong, some went to Australia, and I really wanted to go abroad. Mm. But there was 2 jobs at the largest architectural practice in Europe at the time, which was the Department of Architecture and Related Services at Glasgow City Council. And it was because Glasgow owns all its public buildings and they're open to the public, and it has the largest council housing, public housing stock in Europe. And I got a job in the civic section, so I never got to travel. I went back and did a degree, and as soon as I was finished it, I applied for jobs all over the world and ended up with one in Montego Bay, Jamaica. It was an absolute, I loved it. It was great, but I didn't want to really be kind of a traditional expat. So after 3 years, I left, met my wife at the time. She had never been outside America, so we travelled for 7 months anywhere she wanted. And then I came to Wisconsin, where she was from originally, bought a 56 Buick Roadster and did 54,000 miles in 38 states. We're visiting, we were in Salt Lake City, supposed to be visiting friends in Portland, Oregon. I had my first little mobile phone, a little StarTAC phone. And we got a phone call that said they were delayed. They had been on a vacation and their flights were delayed. Could we hold off? I didn't want to stay in Salt Lake. We'd been there 3 or 4 days already. So we said, hey, we could nip over to Seattle. And then from Seattle, we could just go see friends. It's so close.
Yeah.
Got to Seattle on a Saturday evening. Sunday morning, woke up, went to the university area. Didn't know it was the university area. Just found a coffee shop, picked up a newspaper, and there were 2 columns of jobs for architects, which... It never happens. So we knew the economy was good. Monday morning, I went up to the university, asked to speak to the chairman, said, I know nothing about American architecture, know nothing about this city. Tell me a little about it. He was very kind to see me, and he was very kind to sit with me for a few hours. Made a few phone calls, and then, lo and behold, I had a week's worth of interviews, and I ended up at DLR Group 30 years ago this year.
And was there you spent, so... most of your career has been with this firm, 30 ish years, right?
Yeah, I did about 5.5, 6 years before that.
Yeah.
But my career is defined by this firm.
Was there a moment early on where you said, this is going to be the place where I stay, or did it just sort of happen over time that you just never really left?
No, I don't know if there was a moment in time. I mean, I know why I stayed. I do think there was a moment where I began to understand what employee ownership meant. That was a different thing. And it really did take 7 to 8 years
for it to sink in.
But my boss, who's passed away now, he wasn't the gentleman who interviewed me. He was walking past the interview office. Mm-hmm. He was the soon-to-be managing partner, and he got called in by the gentleman interviewing me because he played golf and I was Scottish, which of course everyone assumes you play golf. And that was at 3:00 in the afternoon. And at 6:30 I suppose early evening now, his name was John Perrott. John asked me if I wanted to go for dinner. And he was the managing partner. And he took me out for dinner. And John and I just talked. And eventually at the end of dinner, he just said, you want to start working Monday? And I went to DLR Group on Monday.
Yeah.
So I stayed because of people like John. Yeah. I stayed because the people were, in my opinion, kind of really, they seemed really genuine, and they have all been ever since then. And so, but the part where I realised it was in my blood was probably about year 7 or 8. I had moved through my career there. I'd had my first kind of own job there, own project there, and all of a sudden I had moved up in leadership, and I thought, this is great. I like this.
This is a good ride.
I like these people a lot, and I trusted them, which is super important to me.
Yeah. Did you ever envision that you would be the CEO at some point? Or did it just sort of kind of happen that way?
I never envisioned it that way. I get asked that a lot, actually, when we do AMA things at work. I love the industry. I just do. I love this. I love the profession. I'm still fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to be in the profession. I wasn't a particularly good student because I wanted out. I wanted to work. And I liked all the facets of the work. I still love contracts. I still love being on site. I still love talking to the contractors and watching it get done. I happened to fall into this idea that I was good at designing things. And so they asked me to be in the end, the chief design officer for the company, which I was for many, many years, 17 odd years. And I suppose if I had a kind of a moment and somebody said, this will be the end of your career, I'd have been happy.
Yeah.
But I always had something in me that knew it wasn't the end. I always knew there was something else left to do. Mm-hmm. And to me at the time, it was changing the scale of the business through design work. And that's what I had worked on for so long. So I never really said, I'm going to be the CEO, I'm going to be the CEO. I wanted the scale of the business to be different, to provide opportunity for all the people who work for the business. So it was a different kind of mindset. And then I suppose in a way, the people that were senior partners or managing partners at that time kind of must have seen something in that. And I became the CEO.
Well, you had an aspiration, and the CEO role happened to fit that aspiration versus you saying, I want to be CEO, it seems.
Ironically, my memory is, and it's a little fuzzy because they don't tell you everything. But of course, I interviewed for this job. I didn't get handed the job. There were other people who wanted the job. But one of the things I said to the company, I had spent 20 years in the business at DLR Group trying to make sure there was inspiration in all of our work, in every location. But what we didn't, I'm not going to say we didn't have, what we struggled to connect as a matrix organisation was a joint aspiration. Two different things.
Yeah.
So I had spent all this time making sure the work in the offices was all as best it could be at the same level, and that the scale of the work, the opportunity of the work was all changing. But I saw this need to change the next level in the company, to not just be a lot of offices that happen to be connected by a structure, but to actually unite everybody with the same aspiration. And if you asked at the time 30 different offices what the aspiration of the company was, you'd have got 30 different answers.
Yeah.
And now you don't. So inspiration and aspiration went hand in hand with me. And I told the board that at an interview. And afterwards, one of them kind of told me that was one of the big reasons they.
Well,
they liked
you hit the nail on the head about, and this is where people get confused about purpose or mission and vision. Mission is sort of what you're talking about. We're here to do something special. And then the vision is sort of like, well, what kind of vehicle do we need to build to come through on that commitment better than any of our rivals could ever hope to do?
Yeah, I got great advice, and you talk about becoming a CEO. I get asked this a lot too, and I my past CEO did a wonderful job and gave me great advice to go find other CEOs. And they told me, I had a great friend. He was the CEO at Steelcase, Jim Keane. He's not the CEO anymore, but he was. Wonderful, in my opinion, wonderful CEO. And he called me up and congratulated me, and we used to chat every Saturday. And he said, Stephen, you got to think of it like a concert, a rock band. He said, you've gone out in the studio, you've made a set of songs. Now you're going out on tour. When you go out on tour, you don't sing new songs. You sing the songs that made the band famous.
That's right. That's what they came to see.
You need to pick the songs you're going to sing, and you're going to sing them. And your tour's going to last 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. Yeah. He said you'll know it's sunk in when you turn up in an office and you hear somebody murmur, God, the CEO's here again. He's going to tell us about the same 3 things he's always told us about. He said, then you get to go back to the studio and make a new album. And I took that advice and did that and worked with our group and our comms people and kind of set an aspiration for the people in the business, and then spent 3 years telling people that story.
I mean, and Steve, you've really been a part of the significant growth of DLR, and you've helped it, not feel overly corporate or sterile. How do you protect that almost stubbornly protect that culture as the firm has scaled?
It's kind of interesting. I mean, we've scaled, we've been really growing last 5 years particularly, and I say the same thing. That's kind of on the backs of the giants that came before me, quite frankly. But we hold on to certain things sometimes because we don't really have a choice. We are not 1,850 people in 2 offices. We have 38 offices and 1,850 people, and so you stubbornly hold on to the scale of our offices. We don't want 300 people in one office, 400 people in one office. It changes the dynamic. Whilst we have to have a home office for filling out applications and awards. If you ask anybody in our firm, they'll tell you we don't have a home office because we don't want anybody to be seen. Yeah. We're an employee-owned, 100% employee-owned matrix organization. Our leadership is dispersed. My CEO sits in Kansas City. My chief design officer sits in Phoenix. Practice officer sits in Los Angeles. CHRO sits in Minneapolis, etc. Go down the line. And so we've it's been good for us culturally, and it's been a challenge, an operational and scaling challenge that you kind of constantly wrap your arms around. But it's the only thing I know. I used to tell this stuff. I shouldn't, but when they...
This is the good stuff. When somebody says I shouldn't say this, this is when...
I know, we're all...
We're going to get a T-shirt printed. Truthfully, we're going to get a T-shirt printed that said there's no plan B, because I told the staff that. I said, the first year, I said, look, I only know one thing.
Yeah.
The value of the work is incredibly important. It brings its own rewards, both professionally and from an enterprise fiduciary standpoint. If we do the best work of our creative lives, it'll make a difference. And I don't have a plan B because that's all I've ever done. I'm not clever enough to have a plan B. I only have a plan A, and that's it.
I mean, I'd love to talk about this too. You've said so many times in this conversation, ownership is so much at the core of who DLR is. Mm-hmm. We are a 100% employee-owned firm. How does this actually show up in behavior, not theory, of your team?
Yeah, I think you've got to look for it in kind of 3 different places. So the aspiration I set for the company was projects, people, and performance in that order. There was a lot of discussion on, was it people first? And I said, well, people are not our industry. Our industry is what we do, the project, the built environment. People are really important. Super, 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 super close second, but they're really important. And so when you think of employee ownership in those 3 buckets, projects, people, and performance, they're kind of all intertwined. At a project level, you ask any client if they'd like to talk to the staff or the owner. They all want to talk to the owner. And so it kind of seeds an attitude of the staff when they do own things that their voice is important to the client. And so from a project standpoint, it makes a difference. From a people standpoint, it means everybody in the company has a meaningful voice, and that is very true practically. We vision with all 1,800 staff. On a practical level, the vision of the company every 5 years is not set by the executives. We spend a lot of time, it takes us about 5 months to plan, and we vision with all 1,850 staff. And so their voice matters. And then we narrow it down until we get to a group of 100 staff, and then they help set the vision. And then from a performance standpoint, we tell people to act like an owner all the time, and that's really in the running and the operation of the business. When you get the chance to go out and the company's buying dinner, maybe you're in a sports bar with your team versus the most expensive steak and lobster restaurant in the city, and our staff kind of think that way. And I've been with people who didn't think that way, and you tend not to survive at DLR Group. So, I think if you think of employee ownership, it's a meaningful voice, that you're a steward of everybody else. There's no such a thing as being alone. You're the person next to you, you're responsible for the person next to you. And it shows up that way in the things that we do.
I think that's the phrase, right? Fully responsible. You're fully responsible for yourself, the clients, the outcome of the company, and there's no "I've got mine" kind of mentality.
There is no "I" in employee ownership. It's all a we. And in fact, if you are an "I" kind of person, you tend not to survive but certainly at DLR Group. It's always a we. And in fact, even in my role, I say this very often, and I mean it. I am a steward in a moment of time.
That's right. Yeah.
I had this really great conversation with another CEO who was asking me about ESOP. They were not an ESOP, and they were asking about the ESOP. Very successful company. We were late one night, over cocktails, admittedly, but late one night. And he said, I'm a little bit envious. He said, if all our partners left the business today, if they all walked away today, business probably wouldn't survive. But you're not like that at DLR Group. I said, no. If we all left today, the employee owners would just keep going. The company has its own legacy. It's not bound or based simply by the people who, at that moment in time, have a chance to guide the ship.
They're just shepherding it
Correct.
through.
Picking up the flag,
and that's how I feel.
marching.
I really feel that that's very important, and that's what our founders believed.
So, Steve, you're ranked number 61 in the Engineering News Records top 500 design firms. So let's just look at the top 100. You're one of the most iconic design firms in the U.S. and abroad, right? I mean, globally, you've got a reputation. Yeah. 25% of the top 100 are now capitalized by private equity. Mm-hmm. Another 9% are publicly traded. So there's you, there's Gensler, there's SOM, there's a number of iconic brands that are either employee-owned or partner-owned. But let's just put them together right now. How conscious are you and the board of how the capitalization of the industry is changing? And do you use or do you deploy your ESOP as a competitive advantage going forward? You talked about a win rate of 25% maybe, or
1 in 4,
whatever it is. So do you see that show up in your win rate? Do you see it show up in your turnover rates of staff? How do you see it show up? Or do you?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple of different questions there, but
I think 3, actually.
So are we aware and conscious of the change in the industry financially from certainly from a PE, private equity standpoint? Of course. We have 2 growth strategies. We grow organically about 50%, and we grow by merger and acquisition about 50%. And that's changed in scale. And we were 600 people, and you had a firm that was 50 people. It was a big deal. When you're 1,800 people and you have a firm of 50 people, it's still a big deal, but it's an easier deal to swallow. And we've always been well run, so we don't carry debt of any variety in the business from that standpoint. So we've always funded our own mergers and acquisitions, always. But as we can now consider larger mergers and acquisitions, we're going to have to consider a different structure of how we go about them, because the cash in the bank has its own value. And do you spend it all on a merger and acquisition? You know, you've got a liability to the shareholders. We know I've always said this kind of bluntly, the death of an ESOP is when it has to go to the bank to borrow money to pay its own shareholders.
Bingo. Yeah.
And so we will never have that.
Yeah.
So, but that means as the stock grows and the company grows, the money in the bank needs to grow. So now there's less money in the bank to do mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
And mergers and acquisitions are becoming more expensive. Therefore, at some point, and in fact, we're kind of in discussions, you know, at some point, how will we choose to do this? And we've got two kind of simple choices. One, our organic growth, our merger and acquisition growth can only be done at a certain scale. Or we have to find a different way to spend money. And we aren't there yet, but I see that, and the board sees that in the future. The ESOP part of it makes a difference. You know, I mean, our retention and recruitment rates are certainly not above. You know, these are hard numbers to feel. You know, the fuzzy numbers.
Fuzzy numbers,
these fuzzy
right?
numbers.
Fuzzy numbers.
I mean, you know that, Mick. Everybody's great. You know, you walk in a room full of architectural CEOs, but it bugs the hell out of me. You walk in a room of architectural CEOs.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're all high and we've all got $1 billion jobs. Life is great. Life is rosy. It never is. That's a lot of rubbish in my opinion. But if you kind of look around, if you go to the American Institute and you go to the large firm roundtable that we're part of, our retention rates are no worse than anybody else's. Yeah. In some cases, it can be a little bit better. But it also depends on the size and scale of the firm.
Right.
Depends on if they're a little bit better. So, you know, the ESOP shows up there. And it also shows up in how we structure, you know, compensation. We're going through a big compensation philosophy change at the moment because a large percentage of our profit goes back to our staff.
Yeah.
And so the balance between base salary, incentive comp, bonus comp, defining all that, it gets quite complicated. And we're right in the middle of trying to bring a little bit more, we want to say translucency to it, because we're in a generation of young professionals who want more transparency, far more transparency than we've ever got. So they want more transparency to the ESOP also. And they're a much more, I don't like to say I was a dumb audience, but they're a very sophisticated audience because of the access to information that I didn't have the ESOP.
Yeah.
I couldn't look up this stack. I didn't have Copilot to ask what an ESOP was.
Right.
You know, but they do. And so they ask really deep
because they're smart folks, right? You're hiring smart folks who are motivated.
Smart, and they are. And they see a purpose and a vision. You know, there's a lot of stuff you talk about with the younger staff, and the way the profession is different today. But you know, you kind of get what you get, and I think they're brilliant. These young, they really are brilliant in my opinion. They're quicker, faster, better, as they should be than my generation ever was. It's just finding a way to synthesize that to a business at the same time as a career, as the same time as providing them a quality of life, which is the whole point of the ESOP, quality of life for them that's part of their work.
Are you finding, Steve, between the guaranteed salaries, compensation, and the incentive comp, is there a shift going on there? There is no pattern? I find in a lot of firms that they're starting to, the folks in general, and again it's a wild big generalization, that folks seem to be valuing the things that are more guaranteed versus the incentive.
It's very true. I think the biggest change is that here, and you're right, it's a bit of a fuzzy conversation, but they want some stability, but that's not that different. I mean, if you ask my generation if they wanted more base salary than bonus, they would say base. Everybody says base, that's how I pay the mortgage. Everybody says the same thing. But I also see a change in what incentive means to them and what incentives bring value. You know, I had a great conversation with a bunch of young staff in the office the other day that said, what would you give up 20% of your base salary for? What would you give up 20% of your base salary for? You know, we're having this debate about hybrid. We had this idea of a completely virtual office, completely virtual. Now, we're 4-1. We're in 4 days, 1 flex day. And I said, would you be willing to give up 20% of your salary to be completely virtual and no appointment? Because remember, at that point, you've got a job, not a career.
Right.
Yeah.
Two different things.
Yeah.
And what was the response to that? Was there an excitement?
Initially, when you say it, there's a bit of an excitement. And then when you start to talk through it, everybody, it's kind of like coming back to the office. Nobody wants to do it. And then when they come back in, they realise they like the people they work with. And then the number of people who come up to you and say, that was great, loved that. Oh, yeah, we had a project meeting. Can we still have more flexibility? You know, you get that kind of hypocritical balance there. But, I mean, we're really looking at that. The staff are the DNA of the company, you know, they're the lifeblood of the business. And I say this often, and it hurts me more when a staff member leaves the business than it does when I lose a project.
Yeah, I can see that.
And you were someone who was really instrumental in making DLR an international company, starting the Shanghai office and you know, working in the Middle East. And, you know, in today's environment, thinking about those needle-moving projects and that great design work and things that you can really be proud of. Do you find the younger generation getting as excited about taking those big leaps and, you know, looking at working on those monumental projects?
I think they're excited about projects at scale, and that's one of the things we pushed for, opportunity and scale, meaningful scale. Internationally, you know, when I pushed internationally, it was not to be international, it was to be global. That was two different things in my mind. Yeah. I didn't want to win work in other countries and bring it all back to the US. I just didn't. I'm very proud to live in America. I'm very proud to be a citizen. But I do know the world's a much bigger place than just the US. And so I wanted us to be a global firm because I believe, and I still believe this, that to understand the history and the culture, the community, the society, even the politics of place is incredibly relevant to the work. And if you have the chance to do that by being there, why would you not?
Right.
And so we put, you know, Chinese people in China and Shanghai and the same in Dubai, and now we're in Saudi, and we're not done. There'll be other global locations hopefully in the very near future. And so a lot of it is because talent doesn't only exist in the US. Right. It just doesn't. Yeah. I know that's a shocker for
most of it is in this room, but granted.
Outside of this room,
there's still
I've always believed that.
Yeah, so Mark and I, we've been in business now 30 plus years doing this for the industry. And a lot of our work, particularly with firms of your scale in the US, was trying to get them to think globally. Because if you look at prior to the Great Recession, if you're a US-based firm, you really didn't need to work anywhere else in the entire world. Right? It's like if you're a Texas firm now, you don't have to work outside of Texas. You can scale in Texas. And prior to the Great Recession, you could scale in the U.S., in the contiguous 48, and go to Hawaii if you wanted to have a lot of fun. But your firms headquartered in Europe or headquartered in Asia or headquartered in the Middle East would have a global view. Mm-hmm. Same with Canadian firms. Canadian firms had a global view. After the Great Recession, the mindset change for a lot of the large architecture firms in the U.S. was you can't be a U.S.-based firm and work internationally. You have to have a global mindset. Yeah. And it's really hard to do. Really hard to shed what you've had and actually embrace the global perspective.
Yeah, it's really
and you all have done that very, very well, probably as well as anybody else in the industry.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not, again, for me, it was just, I didn't want to go to Shanghai, for instance, and take 25 Americans. Right. Our general manager was from one of the largest LDIs in China, and our staff were mostly Chinese. Yeah. And you're right, Mick, and what people didn't realise, and it's still happening. I think I just read a statistic, if you follow the Royal Institute of British Architects, 28, for the first time ever, I think it's nearly 24 or 28% of fees for the largest practices in Europe are now coming out of America. Yeah. So they're coming this way.
Well,
why are we not going that way?
So that's it. If you talk with the CEOs of the large European firms, the US is just a big hole in their donut, right? They're everywhere else, but they're not really in the US. And to be truly global, you got to be in the US, and you got to be a player in the US, not just an afterthought. Which leads me to the question: do you know what percentage of ENR top 500 firms have a foreign-born CEO?
I don't.
Okay, I don't either.
I was going to say, but I get the impression that you were about to tell
I don't
on our next episode.
That's not a fair question.
I'm going to get you the answer sooner rather than later. Because it's an interesting perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. And there's no question. Sometimes people say, how did a guy from Scotland end up in what was, historically a Midwestern, born in Omaha, Midwestern farm.
Yeah.
But you know what? Scotland and Ireland particularly, that Mick, are the same thing. I think there's more Scottish and Irish not in Scotland and Ireland than there are in Scotland and Ireland. Yeah. We've always had a kind of a wanderlust to impact the rest of the world. Yeah. And so, but I don't know. The global thing's just interesting to me. I just don't believe that you should only look at one place for talent. I don't believe you should only look at one place for projects. And I don't believe that your impact, at our scale anyway, shouldn't reach and can't reach other places. What we do, we should do for good. And, and you should want that to be as broad, in my opinion, at our scale anyway, as broad as possible. But I'll say this to you. You said about the growth. There's so much access to information today that no matter how big you are in Texas, you're going to end your scale's stuck there. There's more, potentially more educational work in 2 other nations than there might be in America, depending on whose analytics you read. But just think about that for a second. So you can build a company and just say, I'm just going to keep being a little bit bigger than I am here. Or you can take the chance and say, the next largest market that needs education and is close to the system in the US is XYZ. Why don't we go there? Now, what does that bring you? Resilience. The one thing we've got 10 regions, 12 sectors. The resiliency of the business is incredibly important to an employee-owned firm because we're not selling to anybody. It has to survive for all these people who've invested in it to continue that legacy. And so resiliency is really important. And resiliency, I think today, can't just happen in the US. You have to look at the opportunities in and around the other kind of fun places in the world. That it's kind of life's rich pageant, isn't it?
Underpinning this whole thing is design, and you look at the cost pressures and the efficiency and the speed that everybody wants. Does design still matter today?
Oh yeah, I think maybe more so today than ever before. I think the public cares. When I came to the States, I would tell you that Europeans cared more about design than Americans, just in general. I know that's a bit of a sweeping statement, but I don't think that's true today anymore. I think there's a much more sophisticated understanding about the value of design. And if you think about it, people want more efficiency out their homes. They want more amenities in their workplace. They want to turn up to places in cities. They want to be more entertained when they go out. These are all built environment challenges. Now they might not know that they're design values, right? And that's the difference.
Yeah.
The challenge for our industry is that people don't recognize that those are design values. Why are you happy when you get home? Why are you happy when you're in a stadium? Why is there a reverence when you're in a cathedral?
Right.
The public don't think about that. They just know it's true. They feel it. They sense it. But that's what we and that's what we create. And so I think the value of design is intrinsically growing, in my opinion, and still, unless you commoditize, which we won't do. No, there's nothing wrong with being a commodity-driven firm. There's some really good ones out there, but the value of design it's the same. I used to have this analogy. So there's a coin. The business is quite simple, in my opinion. So take any coin in the world. On one side is the enterprise of the business. On the other side is design value. Yeah. Okay. Now that coin, let's just say it was a £1 coin in the UK. That coin is worth £1. I can go spend that £1. Enterprise value, design value, same thing. If you scratch one face off that, one side off, let's say I scratch the face away, legally, that's worth nothing. You can't spend that. It's not worth anything. And that's the design business. Yeah. You have to have the enterprise and the design value lockstep in this coin and this value that you're going to spend and run your business and practice that way.
Given you're such a student of design, it's what you do, in a way it's who you are. Is there any place in the world that you've walked into that just unexpectedly knocked you off your feet?
Yeah, I think there's probably two places in memory that I'm reminded of that. One's harder to describe, so I'll tell you the first one that's easy. The first time I went to Shanghai, 26 million people in a mind-blowing city that is as small as you need it to be, with little alleys and little markets and little temples, or as big as you need it to be, standing on the bund looking over at what I think is one of the most interactive skylines in the world. So it still fascinates me to this day. Yeah. But really the only piece of architecture that's ever brought a tear to my eye, I met an older gentleman in a bank in Montego Bay, Jamaica. I was putting my salary in the bank. And he was an old American gentleman. He must have been in his late 80s, if not early 90s. John was his name. And of course we happened to chat because we were, the only two people in the bank. And it turns out his wife had been an architect. And if his story's true, and I never looked it up, one of the first graduating female architects from Harvard. And she had designed their home in Jamaica, and he invited me for dinner. So I went. And this home's very simple. Just think of a tic-tac-toe board, okay? Just think of noughts and crosses, okay? The hole in the middle's completely missing, looks up at the sky. Directly above and below on that board is roofed over, but it's a pass-through. On the right-hand side is garage, kitchen, and dining room at each square. On the left-hand side is all bedrooms and a living room. It sits on a plinth that's exactly 15 feet bigger than it. And every exterior wall is Venezuelan mahogany shutters, and they all open. Oh. And I remember walking into that house, which it never happened to me before. And he was, probably because he was so proud of it, his wife had passed, of course, by that point. And I just remember thinking, I could never do this. My brain is not wired with this level of simplicity. And yet it was just stunning. I thought I could live here forever. Yeah. It was just so simple and so beautiful. And I'll never forget that day. And that's one. It kind of drives me with a lot of technology. I love technology, but I say to our staff a lot, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yeah. And just because we can pump out 500 renderings at the drop of a hat, what's the story you're trying to tell? Because this house told a story, their story, her story, and it was just mesmerising.
It floored you.
Yeah, it did. Yes. It completely floored me. I remember it, 30-odd years ago. I remember it vividly.
That's a great story.
It's incredible. I mean, and it's the tactile feeling of some of those spaces. It was just beautiful. Yeah. And, I think we need to touch on the AI of it all.
Yeah. How can you not?
The AI of it all. Yeah. But, I mean, you seem to have a very realistic view of AI. You're not into the camp of AI will solve everything. What's been your honest reaction to the wave that's hit this industry?
Yeah, I'm not sure I don't believe it will solve everything. I just don't believe it will solve everything today. I think one of the things that AI is going to find itself into, it already has, in so many places in what we do. And there's so many places where you can see its value already, particularly in things like planning tools that take away a lot of the grind of options. But at some point, somebody has to make a decision. And the decision's not always obvious. And it's not always, I say this a lot, I have a residential client. Well, we want to do this, we want to do this, we want to do this. And you say to yourself, you'll not like that in the end. Trust me, 5 years from now, that's going to drive you nuts. How does AI do that? Yeah, that's judgment. Mm-hmm. And so I think it'll get there. I really do. I really believe it'll get there. But I'm not a skeptic. I love technology. I just think there are moments for it that make a lot of sense. We've all chased a lot of really shiny objects. I'm building the universe at DLR Group right now, reasonably sophisticated in how we handle our data, which is really what it is all about. It's all about data. And I think even we're mind blown at the hairball of places that AI and or automations, which are, but we have to get a bit more sophisticated with our language. Words matter, I always get told. And so there's a lot of automations which are different than AIs. And I think we're just beginning to see what are like AI agents in our industry, which is not the simple, I did a clever web search, but actually using it to make more intuitive decisions on things. So it's going to change what we do. It is already changing what we do. Yeah. But I don't think we're at a moment yet where there's this massive fall off a cliff moment. I mean, I've got young staff that can't believe we had drawing boards in an office.
Right. Yeah.
And guess what? They're gone. And then I can't believe staffs that had drawing boards going, I can't believe we're going to use that VDU screen computer.
Right.
If I had $1 for every time somebody told me technology was I was going to lose my job because of it, I'd have retired by now.
Well, you've had CAD, BIM, all that stuff, right? Is this one different though from that this changes everything moment, which you have seen
I think
again and again?
I think it is different because one of the things we have to learn in our industry is there was kind of a ethereal thing about having to produce something with your hands. And it wasn't because you had to be a good draftsman or a good draftsperson. It was because you were trying to connect a story. Our work delivers a narrative. Our work delivers a story. In essence, it has a soul. And in the communication of it, which is the most important part of selling the work, the story, the communication of it, you thought through all that. It's kind of why I love to practice in China. It's very poetic. And there's always a poetic concept that you can trace it back to meaning something bigger. And the challenge we have with some of the AI work is it's not tracing it back to anything with any meaning. It's just, here's the 5,000, 10,000, 500,000 things you could do. And I often say, well, what story are you trying to tell? Yeah. If you're going to pick this planning or these renderings, what story is it telling about what because remember, the beauty of our profession is it takes something that happens in your heart and something that happens in your head. That's creativity, isn't it? And it connects them together and you have the ability to tell that story. That's what an architect does. Or any creative professional does.
Yeah, any artist, any kind of designer, and that's the humanity is still in it. Yeah, and will be.
But it will change us.
One of the big concerns that we're finding our clients are wrestling with, and again, it's moving at such speed. I really don't like to use the term exponential, but it is moving exponentially, is what it does to, when you look at a firm like yours, 1,850 people, multiple offices, multiple regions, matrix organization. When you look at that type of organization, as a leadership team, your imperative is, let's behave as one firm as much as possible. Let's be one firm. Mm-hmm. You and your peers, there's a one firm concept, which has really been deployed over the last 20 years as we have moved away from individual geographic-based profit centers, which just force you into commodity. One of the concerns that we're trying to help our clients with is whether AI will destroy the one firm concept. Because how do you make everybody as savvy about AI throughout the organization? Because if you're not as savvy about AI, you will fall behind your peers.
You get left behind.
And then suddenly we've got some strange things happening in our organizations.
Yeah, in truth, we face that right now. We've always spent a lot of time, effort and energy being one firm because we are a patchwork, threaded together. We tell this story, this red thread that threads everyone together. However, we do have 40 design technologists now in the firm, outside of our CIO structure, outside of the information structure. And one of their challenges through practice, integrated practice, was they are the why and the what, but they're very challenged on the how. They come up, this is why we should do this and what we should do. But now I've got 1,850 people, 10 sectors, 10 regions, blah, 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 to get it all through. And so we're going to go into right now our third, what I call major evolution of practice. We did one 7 or 8 years ago. First time we kind of evolved how we thought about practice. And we've just made a couple of new roles. And the whole purpose of it is to go from the why and the what to the how consistently. Now, we've faced this challenge before with design. I used to say, and the company still say it to this day, the bar of design is equal across the whole firm. It's not great in Seattle and bad in Chicago. It's not fabulous in Orlando and dreadful in Kansas City. It has to be, the aspiration has to be that bar moves up collectively at the same time for everyone. But there's a challenge. we did that through knowledge communities, through having a design forum, through putting people in both sectors and regions and offices whose responsibility it was for design excellence, for the quality of the work, for the critique of the work, for the share of the work, not necessarily doing the work. And now we're faced with the same kind of challenge with technology and AI, so that we don't have a laggard office.
And those are huge investments that you made to bring it together with design and have the bar level and elevated, which you really can only do as an employee-owned firm. You make the decision to say, we're going to make this investment, because that doesn't show up immediately in the P&L, right? And in fact, immediately it hits the P&L in a way that you're like, oh my gosh.
Overhead goes crazy.
That's kind of the big experiment for the industry in this world of AI going forward.
Yeah, certainly the how is, I had a great conversation at the LFRT. Somebody asked at a table, how quickly will it fundamentally impact our industry? And the general consensus was this 5 to 7 years, and my consensus was 24 to 36 months at the outside. I really do think that because I'm with you, the speed of change is now even greater. And the difference is, there was a really interesting Forbes article written about AI, and what we're trying to do, all our firms are trying to do, is we're trying to find AI and socket it in, pocket it in, synthesize it into the organizations that we have to its highest and best value, whatever that may be to your organization. But a different way to think about it, and then try and set some course to, which is what we've been trying to do, is if you were building this organization again from the ground up, what would it look like? And so instead of trying to find the places and the pockets on your existing system or structure, what would we look like if we set the goal of being $750 million in new fee, $500 million in revenue, et cetera, diverse, employee-owned? How would we use technology and what would the firm look like? And if your mind shifts to that, then our individual verticals are beginning to think a little bit differently. And it's difficult. You can't tear them down to zero and rebuild them. But when they get these moments, these catalytic moments to make change, what I'm saying to them is don't be fearful of it.
Yeah, embrace it. And, you mentioned something interesting about these drafting boards, and my father had one in the basement for many years. And now these younger professionals are thinking, I can't believe that you actually had them, and how big your office had to be to house all these things. When you get 10 years out from now, what will be the drafting board discussion then? What do we have today that will seem
it's interesting. We've talked about that before, obviously, and you want to find, in my opinion, some big meaningful thing, But in fact, I don't think that's what it is. I think, in actual fact, in 10 years' time, what our younger staff will say is, I can't believe you guys used to do timesheets.
Yes.
Boom.
And I think it'll be for lots of reasons. One, because they won't, it'll have been automated.
Yeah.
Two, hopefully by that point, these newest generations will help us push to value rather than hours.
Right.
Yes.
And so they won't be held accountable that way. I'm not sure they'll get there, but that's my hope, my dream of it. I don't think it'll be this big, I can't believe you had so much square footage of real estate and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think because if you think about, I think about my own career, and it wasn't going from a drafting board to a computer that was a wow moment. It was not having to go back after lunch and pick up handwritten phone messages from a slot in the wall.
So
I remember that was a change.
Yeah.
That was a monumental change in communication.
You could never read the numbers.
It was a monumental change in communication when we went to smartphones that you didn't need. But that was the littlest thing. It wasn't that I was out on site snapping pictures and I didn't have a camera. It wasn't that I was doing digital memos and all that kind of stuff. It was that I got back to the office and didn't have to pick up a stack of those little printed note cards that the front person had written who called me, and that
that's great. Yeah, it's great insight.
That's the change that they will see. And I think for me that'll be timesheets. They'll be like, you did timesheets.
Yeah, that's great.
And now, Mick, it's time for Word to the Wise.
Oh, this is fantastic.
I know how excited you get. This is where we ask our guests for some wise words. And so, Steve, you've had a long career, a successful career, and you've led through all kinds of growth and disruption, and you still seem genuinely energized by the work, the role, and the profession. So for the younger folks coming into this industry, what's the key to building a career you love?
Oh, great question. I think the key that you ask there is in the question, and that's career, not job. You know, a career, I say this often. First of all, a career is a two-way street. You should have one. There's much easier professions to be in if you just need a job. Yeah. So you're building a career in a professional services industry. And the usual, you got to have, you know, this comment about passion and talent nowadays. Some people say follow your passion. Some people say your passion's your hobby. Follow your talent, and then it becomes your passion because your talent's what will provide you a career. And all that is, they're all really good. I'm not an overly philosophical person, in truth. So I'll tell you what, I've given the same advice my entire career, and I think I've taken this advice of myself. And it's simple. Participate, visibility, visibility, visibility.
Interesting.
Be visible if you want to build a career in your own authentic way. I've was noisy and boisterous. Some people are methodical and pragmatic. It doesn't matter, as long as you are visible. So you have to participate, and that will grow you a career. You'll do it in your own way. You'll do it with your own voice. You'll do it with your own actions. But visibility, visibility, visibility. You can't change the world if you're hidden. You can't grow your career if you're hidden. You can't influence the people around you if you're hidden. You don't have to be noisy and boisterous at all. You have to be authentic to yourself, but visibility, visibility, visibility. And I've told so many people that, and I think that's probably, in the end, what I did. If there was one key quality to have, is the difference between an architect in the US and an architect in general in the UK. When you set a professional license in the UK, a large part of that license, 20-25% of it, is self-reflection. The example's simple. In America, you can sue me every week. I can be in court every week as an architect. And as long as I win, I'm okay. That's not true in the UK. You get sued every week as an architect in the UK. Somebody will eventually say, you are lowering the bar of the profession. So you have to self-reflect. You're taught to self-reflect. Right. Are you doing the right thing? And I think self-reflection is a quality that you should have to build a career, not just about your career, but about you, about your personal life. And so I tell staff, after visibility, 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 always find time somewhere in your life to find a quiet moment to think and reflect on the who of who and the what of what. And you'll probably find yourself pretty happy. Yeah,
that is. If you're wise out there, these are words for you. And I think reflection is critical. And as you say, it's what have I learned and how could it change my world and others' worlds going forward? Steve, thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks to our viewers. As always, please like and subscribe. And we hope to see you next time on the street.